Welcome to Gold Shields. Join NYPD veterans Tom Smith and Dan Murphy. With over 50 years of combined experience chasing drug lords, dismantling cartels, and hunting terrorists. Now they pull back the curtain, sharing raw, unfiltered stories from the front lines and the heroes who stood beside them. No topics off limits. This is real. This is true crime. This is Gold Shields.
Hey, welcome back to Gold Shields. This is Dan Murphy. Every week I'm here with my partner in crime and good friend Tom Smith. How are you, buddy?
Good, pal. What's happening today on this nice Saturday that we're recording?
It's a beautiful day, and we are honored to have, people throw words around. Guy's a legend. He's a legend among NYPD detectives, and he's probably wincing as we say that, but he is. And we're going to talk a little bit about some of the stuff in his career. I mean, he's done off the charts stuff. And on top of that, a great guy, too. And can't wait to dive into it. But first, we always thank our friends. Let's jump into that first, Tom.
Yeah, just real quick, because we're excited about getting to this. Big sponsor of ours, Goals. Everyone, please go to goals.com. Big sponsor of Gold Shields. Really honored to have them be part of our show. Goals.com and their tactical equipment, tactical gear is second to none. They're the best out there. So please hit them up. Subscribe to whatever they got, buy their equipment because there's nothing else like it out there. Goals.com. And our other sponsors as well, Streamlight and newspapers.com. Please check them out. Flashlights, the most important thing that we take advantage of.
Oh, yeah.
For granted.
Cop's best friend on a dark night is your flashlight. That's
no doubt. And newspapers.com, we're going back in time and reading about the most historic events in history. So please check out all our sponsors and what they do for us. Dan, listen, you think about the title of our show, Gold Shields. There is no one that represented that better in the NYPD's history than Ralph Friedman. Ralph is the most decorated NYPD detective in its history. And you just said he's a legend. And what better person to have on Gold Shields than the man himself, Ralph Friedman? Ralph, it is an honor and privilege to have you on Gold Shields, my friend. Welcome.
Well, thank you for having me. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Dan. Pleasure.
Oh, it's our pleasure, Ralph. When we first got promoted, Tom and I, at different times, the first time I held my detective shield in my hand, I realized the weight of responsibility that goes along with that. NYPD detectives have a responsibility to uphold the standards that have been set by our predecessors, and the quality of work and how you handle yourself and how you deal with stuff it's a responsibility. And I felt that weight.
I remember the day I got mine. You're bursting with pride. Bursting with pride.
Because you realize you just entered a fraternity that is exclusive.
That's correct.
But there's a responsibility, isn't there? Tell us about your NYPD career, how it started. Please, let our audience hear about. I don't even know what else to say except I'm going to step back and just roll with it, Ralph, because you had some ride.
Yeah, it was quite a ride. I started in 1968, January, as a police trainee because I was too young to be an actual officer. Because I was 19 and I did indoor work. I never had any family or friends that were officers. It was just a fluke. I was out with a few friends on a Friday night. And I said, what are you doing tomorrow? And they said, we're taking the police test. And in those years, it was a walk-in test. You didn't have to file in advance or anything. And they were giving the test in the high school that I graduated in a year before, DeWitt Clinton. So I said, knock on my door. If I wake up, I'll go. It was that casual because I was doing very well. At the time, I was moving furniture. I was lifting weights all the time, bodybuilding. And going to work 10 hours a day moving furniture, I was making a lot of money because I was making $4.50 an hour. And back then, everybody was making like $1.15 an hour or $1.25. So I was doing great. And once I took the test, then it hit me like, I'll be moving the same couch and refrigerator 20 years later. And, police could be a great career without college. And like I said, I had no friends or family that was in the police. And it was just something new. And I got excited about it. And then when they called me right away, I was too young. So what they hired me for was a fingerprint technician because they just started registering long arms in New York. It was the rifle and shotgun law. And this is hard to believe, but people were coming into precincts all over the city voluntarily and saying they got long arms and registering them. It's hard to believe in today's world that people would voluntarily come in. But I was fingerprinting people, and I did that out of the 4-4 precinct, which was a busy house back then. And I saw how police officers work, and it was very new to me. And I really ate it up. I really respected these guys and see what they did. And I couldn't wait to become a cop, to be out there. So I was a police trainee for 2 years almost a day. And like I said, I did that for 6 months. And then I got transferred to this new thing that opened up for a year and a half. They invented 911. And it's the communications bureau out of 1PP, One Police Plaza. Before that, it was like a 7-digit number that you would call if you wanted the police. And each borough had their own. And an example was in the Bronx, it was in a garage in the back of the 4-6 precinct. That was the borough communication. That was back in, the late 60s and prior. So I was over there for a while answering 911 calls, putting like cardboard paper, I would write on it, shots fired at the location, and put it in a conveyor belt where there were 5 conveyor belts, one for each borough. And it would go into a dispatcher and they would send the police. And then after a while, I got not promoted, but moved over to what they called the action desk. And what I did was I was a go-between between bosses and dispatchers. And if it was any heavy kind of job, I would report back what the disposition was. If it was like someone shot or a bomb scare or a bank robbery or a police officer injured, I'd get the information from the dispatcher and let the bosses know, oh, this is the results of the cakes, whatever it was. And then I turned 21 and I went into the police academy immediately. And back then it was only 4 months long. There was no psychological training or testing. And we had full contact with boxing and fighting. And if you didn't, do full contact, you'd have to fight the instructors, and you didn't want to do that. And it was rough physical, and I enjoyed it though because I was into physical fitness. And then after the 4 months, I got sent. You check a chart on the walls when you graduate, and it just tells you randomly where each person is going. And I've heard of the 4-1 because it had a reputation by then, where it was called Fort Apache. And when I went up to the board, there it was, Ralph Friedman, 41st precinct. So I was excited. I wanted to go to an action precinct because I always heard that you learn more in a precinct like a 4-1, which is also known as, they give them designations. There's like A houses, B and C. That was an A house, or what they call a shit house or an action house. And you learn more like in 1 year than you would sometimes 15 or 20 years in a normal precinct. These were ghetto precincts. So each borough has a couple of them. We have the South Bronx. I did all my career in the Bronx, by the way. And, Brooklyn has Bed-Stuy and places like that. There's Harlem in the Lower East Side of Manhattan. Every borough has them. And you learn your way. And you have the knowledge that you learned in the police academy, but you learn on the street how it's actually handled. But there are a lot of things that you must know from the academy. And, even though it was the 70s now, this was February of 70, and we weren't called police officers back then. We were called patrolmen. Then they had a guy come in a few years later, the city hired them to change the names of everything. And it was a lot of money back then. They paid them like $100,000 to change the name and everything in the police department. And that's just what I just said now. They called it police department. We used to be known as police force. And that was changed IAB to IAD or vice versa. Police officers, because that included male and female. There are just so many name changes and things that were changed around. And that was like the beginning, I guess, of political correctness or whatever you have. And you know how it expanded, obviously, over the years. But I went to the Form 1 and I saw these cops working there. Well, first, when you get there, you don't get a locker. You're working months out of your car until someone retires. And then they give up like 1 or 2 or 3 lockers, you know. And we had TPF working out of there, which was Tactical Patrol Force. So just to give you an idea, the 4-1 precinct doesn't cover a lot of area as far as precincts are concerned, but we had 425 cops working out of the precinct, plus 200 TPF, Tactical Patrol Force, that worked 6 to 2s. And then besides that, you had all kind of borough teams and citywide teams, what we would call poaching in the precinct, because they would come in there to get their activity because there was so much going on. And when I first got there in uniform, you know, you get foot posts, and we didn't have phones weren't invented, computers weren't invented. There was no technology as you know it today, nothing. And they would tell you to go to a foot post. Oh, Friedman, you got foot post 5, and you go in the back and look at a map, and then you got to figure it out. By the time you found it, you would do back at the precinct and the tour. You know, you don't know what you're walking into or getting into on the way. And then you start filling in sectors. And then you get a sector when someone retires or transfers or whatever, and you wind up getting a sector. But just to give you an example how busy it was, on Friday and Saturday nights, if you came in for a 4 to 12, they would give you the radio car with the lights and sirens on, and you were backed up 30 to 40 jobs. I mean, you rode with a light and siren on your whole tour. You never catch up. Shots fired, assaults in progress, past burglary, burglary in progress, rape, robbery, murders, everything. It was like the Wild West. But as Wild West as it was a controlled chaos. Bosses, you still had to, be accountable for everything. And, we always hear it's the Wild West. And I've been involved in a lot of shootings over the course of, I only did 14 years after the 2 years as a trainee. And I was involved in 15 shootings, 13 with perpetrators and 2 with dogs. But that's a lot, but you had to be accountable, and you were investigated very thoroughly by multiple units and agencies when you did get in it. So people have this thing like, you could use your gun easily. It's not like that. The police department checks everything, different units, and they check where every bullet went. Even if it went far away, they do trajectory and find out what it hit, if it hit anything. Obviously, if it hit people or cars or went into a store or a home. So I'm saying, it's not that we had free reign. Police are always responsible, and use of a weapon is a big responsibility, even when you don't use it. I always tell people, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 a year, you have a big responsibility, on or off duty, to safeguard that weapon.
Ralph, just for the benefit of the audience, Tom and I knew about your career. Your reputation precedes you into any room, especially NYPD guys. We all know who you were and the things you did. But to the average listener out there who is not in law enforcement, or even those who are or were in other places around this country or this world, it's universally understood that the majority of police officers will do a full career without ever having to discharge their weapon. That's
true. I've heard that, but I did work.
But you didn't see that, of course, because
I worked in ghetto precincts, and I was very active. I went looking for it, and I was exposed to it. I grew up in the Bronx, and then I got assigned to the Bronx, which was only a few miles from my home, but I thought I was in another country. I grew up in a really Jewish, Italian, Irish neighborhood. And now I'm going over to the ghetto where there was blacks and Spanish and other countries there. And there was a different culture. There was a disregard for human life. There were a lot of good people that lived there. And they were like being hostage and stuff. I mean, there were decent people working there that we had to protect, and that's why the police are there. But there's a lot of animals there, savages that took advantage of their own people and anybody who came in from the outside to buy guns or drugs. And there was, we had to protect these decent people that lived there when it was a beautiful neighborhood, the Bronx. And neighborhoods change over the years.
Right. And yeah, and you know what, for like Dan, you brought up a great point of, our listeners who may not understand this, but you hear on the news today how out of control New York City is, with crime. This is Disney World compared to what you dealt with in the 70s, especially in the 4-1, because me and you had spoken, Ralph, that my dad was in the 4-1 at Fort Apache up in the squad, probably somewhere around the same time you were. And the stories I used to hear were out of control of what was going on. Listen, when you have a major motion picture made about your precinct and Paul Newman's the star of it, it's pretty well known of what was going on in that.
Well, that made it like worldwide known, But what's out of control today is the politicians and the laws that they make and how they handcuff police. When in actuality, they should be very happy and be thankful that there's men and women that still want to do this kind of job. People don't realize, and I think a majority of the cops don't realize themselves how much they do and how valuable they are, and that they would take a bullet for a stranger. What kind of job does that? And we're not afforded mistakes. Like, if you're an accountant, you can have an eraser. If you're a plumber, you could change the pipe, or a carpenter, you change the wood. We make a mistake, it costs an arm or a leg, or it could cost you your life. And you got to be combat ready. You got to be aware of your surroundings, be observant. It's a very responsible job, and I think a lot of cops take themselves for granted, put it in some word, because they do something great, and I don't think they know how good they are sometimes.
That's a fair statement. Getting back to combat ready just for a second. I came on the job in January or February, actually, of '84, and I was the tail end of your career, I imagine, or close to it.
And we are thrilled to announce that Galls is now a sponsor of Gold Shields.
That's right.
#1 police equipment world that is out there is now part of our show, and we're beyond words of being proud and thankful that we're responsible for Galls being part of our show, and we're thrilled.
Looking for powerful defense without the mess? Meet Impact, a revolutionary line of chemical irritants designed for law enforcement, military, and personal protection. With no blowback, no cross-contamination, and easy cleanup, Carry Impact delivers unmatched stopping power without the hassle. Whether you're in the field or on the street, safety should never be compromised. Protect yourself with the next generation of defense. Carry Impact, stopping power redefined. Have you ever wished you could go back in time and see the events that shape the true crime cases that fascinate you? With newspapers.com, it's like having a time machine to the past. Dive into more than 1 billion newspaper pages from 1690 to 2025 and relive the headlines that shocked entire towns. Explore newspapers from the US, UK, Canada, Australia, and beyond with a simple search. Read the breaking news as it happened, crime scene reports, witness testimonies, and courtroom drama. Explore forgotten clues and see how the media shaped the narrative of infamous cases. But it's not just the major stories. Newspapers.com lets you dig into local mysteries, missing persons reports, and the small-town scandals that history forgot. It's the closest you can get to being there when it all unfolded. So, if you're ready to dig deeper into the crimes that keep you up at night, start your journey today at newspapers.com. Use the code GOLDSHIELDS for an exclusive 20% discount on your subscription.
Well, my official retirement date was January 30th of '84, but I got hurt in '83, and I was in the hospital for a few months, and then they kept me on instead of promoting me. because I was due to get first grade that year, probably when the holidays came up, like Thanksgiving and Christmas, when they have major promotions. But in those years, they didn't just give it to you and then you get out. So they did a lot for me. The DEA, our union, the Detectives Endowment Association, they gave me a maid and a chauffeur to get me around when I got out of the hospital. ESU gave me a walker, crutches, and a wheelchair. They took me home by ambulance. They did a lot of things. They gave me an accountant to figure out exactly when I should get out, because I stayed on to pick up the extra checks like holiday, uniform. It was an extra paycheck the way it laid out in December and January. The job took care of me very well, and so did the union. But they don't promote you, and then, you get out and it's an empty slot. Like I said before, a grade was very tight, and I did get out as a second grader. And I also got promoted. When I got third and second, it was very weird circumstances, because they were going to lay me off in 1975. They said that was the first time civil service was under the gun, because police jobs, civil service was a secure job, and then all of a sudden came the fiscal crisis of 75, and they laid officers off, and I got a notice to be laid off, and they were laying guys off with 5 years or less. I said, well, I got 7, because I had the 2 years as a trainee. They said that we don't have no record of it. So I said, thank God, I just happen to be one of these articulate guys with paperwork, and I saved those pay stubs. I had to bring them down to the employee relations because we didn't have computers. So I had to show them my pay stubs. And then not only did they keep me on the job, I was the last promotion. So I got third grade. And then there was a hiring and job freeze for 7 years. The only guys who got promoted were really, if you were in like a big gun battle, and it was probably in Manhattan, that made the front page. In the ghetto precincts, they didn't care if they were shooting. If you were in a high profile like the 17th or the 19th, you would get promoted. There were very few promotions. So I really got the next promotion, which was 7 years later. I got second grade, and right away they put me in for first, and it was going to take a little while.
So one of the things I was just trying to touch on for a second, real quick, was the equipment. Let's look at the equipment, because anybody that looks at cops nowadays, they have all kinds of stuff, and rightly so, to protect yourself. High quality semi-automatic weapons with magazine capacities of 15, 16, 17, extra mags, all that kind of stuff. Now, when I came on in 84, it was very similar to your time, although we had given to us the bullet 10-layer Kevlar vest by point blank. Now, 10-layer, the theory being it'll stop your own weapon if it's taken from you, 38. But it's not going to stop half the stuff we were seizing on the street. But your time, you were using revolvers too. All these shootings and gunfights and things you got involved in was with a 6 or a 5-round revolver, correct?
Well, I always use the 6. I like the Smith & Wesson on duty is a 6. I don't know why everybody ran out and bought Smith & Wesson's. The small weapon was a 5-shot. I always said, I'm going to buy the Colt, which was a 6-shot. So I always carried 2 6-shots with extra bullets on my belt also. But today, like you said, they have incredible technology and weaponry and things on their belt, all these gadgets, but it's all useless if they don't allow you to use it. When we went out there, we had our 38 and a nightstick and your guts and wits. That was it. And just to talk about technology, I'm going to tell you a funny story. We get notified that we're going to go up to the range, and they got high-tech stuff now. So we go up there, and this was the high-tech stuff. We got out to the range, and they had a parking pole, a meter, a mailbox, and an abandoned car. They say, this is it. You hide behind these. Instead of just punching out your weapon. This was it. Hide behind a meter or hide behind a car. But they did tell you, if you go behind the car, stay behind the tire so they don't shoot underneath. But that was the high tech. We had very rare did when we first got on, we didn't have the portables either. And there was no beepers, no cell phones, no computer. Nothing was invented yet. And they said hiding behind the car or a meter or a mailbox, this is high-tech training now. It's funny, but we took that seriously back then. You know, it, we didn't know better. You didn't know the things that were going to be, invented.
Yeah, even me coming on in 1990, all that was still at the range. That was Charlie Range. That was the mailbox, the car, all that was still there, when I got.
Oh, so you know what I'm talking
Oh
about.
yeah, we still had the 38s when I got on. So it was.
Now they got these rooms, simulated rooms, and video and lasers, and they got great training. All this is great, but if you handcuff the police and you tell them, here's the best weaponry, here's the best technology, but you can't use it, what's the point? I'll tell you, one of our best things, which I don't see today, is the nightstick. That's an incredible tool. Sometimes there's more law and order at the end of a nightstick than in a court of law. It's, I don't know, you have to let a cop be a cop. What other job does everybody, you always get people telling you how to do the job who never did the job.
Oh,
Well, these politicians, they would shit in their pants if they had to go in an alley at 2 a.m. by themselves. And like I say, cops take it for granted, but they got the guts to go in there. But these people that criticize them wouldn't have the balls to go in there.
It's funny. You just come up with, what your guys in your generation, 1970, talked about, and Danny's generation in 84, mine in 90 and on, same conversations. Same exact conversations. Nothing changed with politicians and politics and all that.
But when I was on, the politicians were good. They would address us. And when we turned out, there'd always be a politician would show up, maybe once a week or once a month. And they would tell you, and our bosses would tell us the same thing. They would turn us out and say, take these bad guys off the street, make collars. They wanted us and they backed us. But it's not like that today. I think it changed like about 10, 15 years ago, where I don't know where or when or how the good guys became the bad guys and vice versa. They don't respect police today. Maybe it was even a shorter time ago when they started throwing water on police. Remember that?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And it's disrespect.
2021.
And now I'm big on Facebook and stuff, and I see these videos, and some of them are heartbreaking. When I see these people getting in a cop's face, you got to have that, space. You don't get to let somebody get in your face where they could, they're screaming and spitting on them, but they could just as easy stab you. Like it's, they're getting in their personal space. And these officers, when we went to a job and they send a radio car or you went on foot, you could handle that job. Today, they got backup. They keep calling. I see 20 cops. And they're not taking an action. Now they're calling for 2 or 3 sergeants. The sergeant's looking for a lieutenant. When I was on, a sergeant was God. I don't know if you'll find this hard to believe. I know some people will. But Con Ed would not go into a precinct and open a manhole without notifying the sergeant first. He didn't do those things. And a lieutenant, there was only Irish lieutenants on the desk. And a captain, you've never seen them. I mean, you respected the rank so much, and it goes up the line. But nothing would be done without a sergeant's approval, But you would handle the jobs yourself. You didn't want to call a sergeant because then you're in trouble. You got to handle it. They gave you a gun, a shield. They taught you the law. They taught you the use of force. And you got to go out and do your job. Now they're all scared to do their job. And everybody's calling everybody. There's 20 guys at a scene when a radio car or footman could do the job, and that's it. You get back to disposition. You had to whack a guy, you whack him with a nightstick, and sometimes that corrected the condition. But today, it's like, I don't know. It's like, I don't know what happened. Policing is out the window.
I watched it change even in my time, Ralph, and I was on 84 to 04. And I watched when I first came on, it was very much, you got a job, you went to your job, you handle your job.
That's right, you handle it.
Sergeant didn't, and then I watched at some point during the career, sergeants had to get called to the scene to verify an arrest. Verify an arrest. I remember when I became sergeant, I'm like, I got to do what? I got to go verify arrests? I was off patrol for years playing detective, and now I'm like, I got to go every time somebody locks somebody up on a domestic, I got to go stand there and go, okay, what happened? Ridiculous.
Well, domestic, I think, changed a a big amount changed with the O.J. Simpson case. After that, they really took away discretion from police.
Right. You got to
Who
lock
had to
everybody
make
up.
an arrest, because what their thinking was that if you let a guy go or a girl go, and then it came back later, the guy came back and then killed the woman, you could have had him in jail, and they want to hold you responsible. Then they started all that accountability, and bosses were getting in trouble when they're off duty. That's your guy. He did something. You're responsible.
Well, I'm sorry, Tom. I remember going to the scenes of shootings and even homicides where the highest rank there was a sergeant.
Yeah.
And they were at it
Like I
as
said.
shortly. It was a non-fatal, and even if it was likely, it was like, all right, crime scene, whatever, detectives would come. Wasn't that big of a deal? And then it got to the point where a non-fatal guy getting shot in the foot in a park in the Bronx has 2 chiefs, 3 inspectors, 5 captains, 9 sergeants, 52 cops. It's like, what are we doing? Like we're
I even see I was doing some jobs in Manhattan after I retired, a couple of years ago, and I would see captains chauffeuring inspectors. Like you never saw these guys, like Eagles and scrambled eggs. It's like you never saw them. You'd have to maybe bump into them in 1 PP or something. Now they're on patrol. I see white shirts doing traffic. If you see videos and on TV and stuff, like for special parades and stuff, and they're out there doing traffic, it's so different.
Absolutely. And
It's-
speaking of so different, when it comes to supervisors, the one thing I wanted to ask you, and you touched on it earlier, everyone out there, 14 years Ralph served in the NYPD and had 2,000 arrests, 100 off-duty arrests, 15 shootings, and I could keep going on. But the shootings part, I want to ask you, how was that received from your supervisors and 1PP at that time? Was that, okay, just another one by Ralph? Because if you did that today, you'd be gone. You'd be off the job and gone. And that's why I want to ask you, how was all that action looked upon back then?
It was, well, as long as you articulate what you did and you were correct in doing it, it was well received. And like I said, they investigated fully. But another thing, like the sergeant and maybe a duty captain would respond to the scene when I have a shooting. They would ask me what happened, and I would tell them what happened. I had nothing to hide. I'm going to say, this is what happened. And today, I think they tell you to be silent. You got to invoke your rights and get a PVA lawyer. And there's so many things that it got so interwound with legalities and stuff. We used to tell the sergeant, my sergeant would show up. I tell him what happened. I said, and you stay at the scene and then tell him. When my partner got shot, one of my partners got shot 7 times. I couldn't leave the scene to go to the hospital. I stayed there because I killed the guy who shot him. I had to stay there and articulate what happened. And then the investigation would start by the shooting team, internal affairs, our squad, the DA's office. I mean, everything was accounted for and checked out. And obviously, that I'm sitting here today, I was justified in what I did. And another thing that I want to say to your audience, and well, officers would know this, but if you have civilians listening, police officers, detectives, and cops and law enforcement, they don't make the decision. It's the perpetrator that makes the decision. If he fires on me, if he just puts his hands behind his back, I say you're under arrest, and he goes peacefully, that's the end of it. He can fight it out in court. But if he wants to fight on the street, he's making that decision, and I'm reacting to it. Like any other police officer, you got to react. That's what we're taught to do. And we're never taught to kill anybody, but we're not taught to shoot in the arm and the leg. That's movie and TV stuff. But we're taught to shoot at the main torso, and you stop shooting when that threat is gone. Now, if he happens to die as a result of it, that's on him. But I got to stop that threat, and any other police officer has to stop that threat. And you have to be protecting your own life, your partner's life, or a civilian's life. So the other side of the coin of the people I shot, I killed 4, I shot 8, killing 4 of them, is that I saved lives. If I'm justified in shooting, I saved my own, my partners or civilians. And that's what we're taught and trained to do. And that's a requirement of the job. But the perpetrator makes that decision. Just like if he doesn't have a gun, he throws a punch. I'm not a punching bag. I'm going to have to punch back. So it's perpetrators that make these decisions and cops have to react. Otherwise, they're going to get hurt or killed.
You had there was a TV show that told you stories.
The Street Justice, the Bronx.
Right. Excellent show. And I remember watching a bit of it. And I think it was about the situation with your partner getting shot 7 times. That was recreated.
Yes. That was the first episode.
Would you mind sharing that story for our audience? Because that's, wow, that's a cop's worst nightmare, right? You leave the station,
Absolutely.
that happened.
Well, what happened was, first off, he wasn't my regular partner, but he was in my anti-crime unit. And what happens is when you go to court, we're always going to court, right, on other arrests. When you come back, the boss will assign you to another officer or team who's working. And in our case, Cal Unger, who I wound up working with that day, who I was friends with, I worked with him on numerous occasions prior, but he wasn't my direct partner. So he came back from court early, and I came back from court early. So the boss teamed us up as partners for that tour. So we went out, and we were doing anti-crime work. And anti-crime is specifically supposed to make pick-up arrests. You get your hunches or you get suspicion, and you follow people. Or, like I said, we didn't have computers then, but we had people in the precinct that would use what they called pinpoint maps. And then you would say, well, there's a lot of robberies going on between 5 and 7 when people are coming home from work in this area. So we would blend in and try to catch them in the act. Well, on this day, there was a radio run, which, like I said, we're not supposed to really take them, but we didn't take it. We took it as a backup because the 4-1 is always busy, is heavy jobs, and it was very tight-knit in the 4-1, and it was a great camaraderie. So you would back up officers. I'm not going to let an officer go to a job and there's no uniform to back them up. So anti-crime or the detectives would back them up. So we picked it up as a backup, but we got there first. And the job was originally a burglary in progress. Then it escalated to a girl calling for help in the apartment. So now, in our mind, or a police officer's mind, you would think it's a home invasion, which is more serious than a regular burglary, because a burglary in the day, there would be nobody home. So we get there first, and it's on the top floor, always. So we go up there, and always, right? So we get up there, and we see the door is ajar, maybe 5 or 6 inches with the frame broken. And we start to hear screams. So we have our guns out, and we start to go in the apartment. And it was 2:00 in the afternoon, but it was pitch black. There were drapes and cardboard and blankets on the windows. You couldn't see anything. So we walk into the apartment, and we're side by side, and we're hearing these screams. And how we later found out was that we entered like a living room, a main living room, and then there was a hallway directly in front of us going to the back that faced the bathroom, and off to the right was a bedroom. And so what happened is we hear the girl scream, and we start going in this hallway screaming, police, police. And next thing we know, and it's pitch black, a guy jumps out who's shirtless, and he was a black guy, and we couldn't see him, and he just starts firing on us. Right away, we see the muzzle flash, obviously, and my partner gets hit, and I see him going down right next to me, to my left, and he's emptying his gun at the guy. I start firing at the muzzle flash, and we're in this hallway that's probably about 10 feet long and maybe 4 feet wide. And the bullets are ricocheting. My partner, I see him going down and firing. And then the guy tries to run past me. And he runs right into me, and I grab him with my left hand on his trap. And I was young and strong and had a good grip. And I'm holding his trap, and he's running into me, and I have my gun pressed against him, and I fire my last round, killing him. It was pressed against his chest, shot him in the heart. Now he goes down. I'm the only guy standing. There's smoke, all the smell of gunpowder and everything. I see my partner's hit and bleeding. And I go to pick up the radio to call it in. But as I'm saying, officer shot 1013. guys are there already because they were responding to their first burglary run. They were only like maybe 1, 2, 3 minutes behind us. And officers came in, flooded the apartment, especially once I said 10:13, and they lifted him up, and officers are still responding. I'm hearing the sirens of ambulances and police cars, but they carry him down the stairs to put him in a radio car. And what happened was, as a 1013, this was on Fox Street, which is a one-way street, one lane of traffic and parked cars. But now all the radio cars converging. The radio car that we put him in, and one of the officers, Billy Rath, there was a lot of officers there, but Billy Rath was trying to stem the flow of blood and carry him, putting him into a radio car, but the radio car couldn't get out. So it starts bumping cars to bump him out of the way. Meanwhile, the guys were smart enough to call highway patrol, and they closed every intersection. Even though a police car has the light and sirens, you still need a little caution going through an intersection. So highway closed every intersection. So no matter how far it was, the route was going to be open. And they raced him there. And he made medical history, Cal Unger, by surviving, but he took 72 pints of blood in 3 hours, which was, it's pouring out of you as they're operating. It's flowing out like they can't stem it, and they're pouring it in. And he survived, and thank God he lived. And, he got a medical retirement, moved out of state. He only died about 2 years ago, And he got shot. He took 5 direct hits, and he took 2 ricochets, one in the back and one in the arm, which they were able to remove with a tweezer. But the 5 direct hits were very bad. One was in a sac under the heart that holds fluid. And if we didn't go to Jacoby Hospital, he wouldn't have survived because they actually made the blood platelets that he needed right there. And it happened to be a friend of mine who worked who was running the blood center that worked out in the gym with me. And ironically, he was making the blood platelets to save my partner's life. And the police commissioner and the mayor, they gave the doctors and nurses their awards for, saving his life and making medical history at the time of 72 pints of blood. The officers, everybody responding, did what they were supposed to do, and every second of each guy saved this officer's life. Even though the cars were backed up, that's expected because they're coming to help. But the way they radioed the hospital first to let them know an officer is coming in with multiple gunshot wounds. They closed all the streets, and they didn't wait for an ambulance who never would have been able to get into the block anyway. So the presence of mind to pick him up at that second they arrived and carry him downstairs, and knowing he was very seriously injured. But all these little things they were big things, but all these things that were done were life-saving seconds.
Listen, you hear stories like that, and it's chilling even now, 50
and
years
later. Just to show you, something like that, wouldn't that be like the Medal of Honor or the Combat Cross? We got nothing for it. We got honorable mention, which makes you eligible for Medal Day, and we didn't go to Medal Day. So there's a lot of, politics or where it occurs. If that would have happened in the 17th or 19th, we both would have got Medal of Honors the next day. They actually told me when they showed up at the scene, PBA showed up, they said, "Oh, you're going to both get made detective. You're going to get the Medal of Honor." Then next thing, we didn't get it. But there's a lot of incidents. I could tell you other stories of a shooting where we got nothing. Not even an EPD.
Unbelievable.
We were driving, me and my partner, Detective Roger Cortez, and we used to go out on patrol, which you're not supposed to do, but we always put down, we're going out to interview a complainant or a witness. So we would be able to be in the street and make our pickup collars. So we're driving around and we hear gunshots. We turn the corner and there's 2 perpetrators shooting at each other. And here's the kicker. There was 2 girls, a 16 and a 17-year-old girl, who were shooting it out on the street. We jump out of the car and he grabbed the girl, I grabbed the girl. And you know what the boss told us? He said, on the write-up, he says, the sergeant put us in for a medal. And he writes, the sergeant knocked the medal down. He says, two grown men disarming a 16-year-old girl, like the bullet or sex matters.
Yeah.
Right? There's bullets flying. Does the gun or the age make any difference? You're interrupting a running gun battle on the street, and we got nothing. Nothing.
The term,
Totally.
yep, the term back then was routine patrol.
Routine patrol.
Routine patrol.
Well, we weren't even supposed to be out routine. but I'll tell you what happened. How I had the success in the detective bureau was something I came up with, and the bosses loved it. And that's what gave me all the freedom that I had on the job. And because I never wore a suit and tie, and I made pickup collars all week long. And what I invented was the detective squad is really based on clearance. That's what they like. They want a case cleared. So what I would do is, I came up with this on my own. I said, I'm going to make a pickup collar, a gun collar, right? Then I make up the 61, but I don't close it. I send it to the squad, and I catch it, and I close it out with my own arrest. I mean, it sent the clearance. Well, you guys were detectives, right? So you know what I'm talking about. So the boss's clearance went up. He said, oh, this is fucking great.
It's genius.
That's what I did. I came up with this, and then they let me do what I want. They let me, like, I couldn't stand doing day shifts. So the boss, and we didn't have cell phones. I said, listen, let me start work when the DA needs me. All the DAs knew me because I was in central booking every day. So what they would do, I give them my home phone number, and they was allowed to call me at home. And I said, no matter when you call me, I will be in that courtroom 1 hour later. And I would call the house, tell my boss I'm going to court. So they might call me at 11 o'clock. I start at 12. So I could work after court, make another collar. So if they didn't need me before lunch, you do an 8 to 4, and they break for lunch, you could be going in the courtroom 1:30, 2 o'clock. Your whole day is gone, and you woke up for nothing.
Patriot is a premium whiskey hard seltzer. We've carefully crafted 4 flavors that not only taste exceptional, but can be enjoyed on any occasion, anytime. We're committed to giving back 5% of all profits to the core groups we call the backbone of America. We are proud to help those who serve our great country. This is America's Seltzer, the brand that stands for quality, community, and the American spirit.
When it comes to the safety of law enforcement, first responders, and military personnel, every moment counts, especially in the dark. Streamlight provides the reliable, high-performance lighting solutions that these heroes trust in the most dangerous situations, whether it's a car stop, navigating dark alleyways, or exploring abandoned buildings. With Streamlight by their side, our heroes can tackle challenges with confidence, knowing they have the power of advanced lighting technology to guide them. From the first responders on the front lines to the law enforcement officers ensuring our safety, Streamlight is there to make every mission a little easier and much safer. Join us in supporting those who protect us. Visit Streamlight.com to discover how you can be part of the team keeping our heroes safe. Because when they shine, we all shine.
Everything is hysterical, but listen, that's just real quick. I just want to take a real quick break. I just laughed this off because it's great.
Well, that's how I was able to squeeze 35 years of police work into 14 years.
Right. That's exactly right. Real quick, everyone, just a quick break for our special people who help us out on this show. And I'm going to laugh my way through this, but Galls.com, big sponsor. Check them out, please. They're supporting this show to no end, and we're so thrilled that they are part of it with all their police equipment, their tactical gear. Please check them out, Galls.com. And another part that's really important to us, and I know it's important to Ralph, Cop Line. There's too many cops out there hurting themselves, hurting family members that need to talk to someone, and you hear it all the time on this show and how much of a proponent we are of it. Copline.org, 1-800-267-5463. Please reach out to them if you need to just have a brief conversation with someone about a bad day It's all answered by retired cops who've all been through it, who are all trained. So please give them a call if you need to speak to someone to avoid what's going on in law enforcement today, on duty, off duty, and all that. 1-800-267-5463, copline.org.
So, Ralph, a couple of things that struck me. First thing, for the benefit of the audience, any one of those of us that wore the uniform understands that if you're active, you're in court a lot. If you make a lot of arrests, you work in a busy place, you're in court a lot for a variety of things: hearings, grand juries, trial prep, trials themselves, you name it. But the dilapidated court system that exists now, probably still, but definitely did in the 70s and 80s and 90s in New York City, incredibly overworked court system. People don't understand. I remember working in Manhattan when I was working in Harlem, Washington Heights, and at the end of the year, the arrest numbers assigned to an arrest start with the borough, like B for the Bronx or, K for Brooklyn, and then they have the year and then the number. So I remember we had 120-something thousand arrests on December 28th or something one year when I was down there. 128,000 people were processed through central booking in 1 year in one borough. That's how overwhelmed and overburdened the court system is. And so it's a revolving door in certain ways, but you're always going back and forth. But you also, one thing I wanted to hit on, you made a lot of off-duty arrests, and I got to tell you, I made one. And I
made 105.
Yeah, I walked into a robbery in a bodega, looking to get a soda on a hot night on my way into to work an overtime shift anyway in uniform, and I double parked in Manhattan, and I just walked inside, and the guys were robbing the place. So I just drew down on them and grabbed one, the other one we got later. But anyway, not a big war story. But at the end of the day, the captain.
It is robberies, robberies, and off duty is great.
The captain gave me such a hard time. They were like, they don't like, he was questioning me in front of the perp in the cell. All right, where do you live? What's your address? I'm like, Captain, I'm not comfortable. I'll write it down for you. I'm not talking about that in front of this perp.
Real smart cap.
Yeah, he was great. He was giving me a hard time. Like, why did you have to go up 3rd Avenue? Why did you, what? That kind of stuff. So you made a lot of off-duty arrests. Tell us about what kind of stuff you saw. And now you lived in the Bronx, right?
Yes.
Okay, so you lived within the boroughs, which meant you're always on duty, right? Technically.
Well, you're always on duty anyway as an officer. Back then, you were required at all time to have your gun and your shield and your ID. Today, they encourage you not to carry your gun and shield if you're going to go out drinking. These are all laws. The gun, drinking, and not carrying your shield, that was created when they changed the age. The age for being an officer changed a couple of times over the years. It was 21, but then it dropped to 20, and they found there were younger guys out drinking, and there was some problem. So they said, you could go drinking, but don't carry your gun and shield. See, when I was on, you would get a rip, which means people that are in law enforcement, you get in trouble for not having a gun and shield. But then the rules changed because of young guys drinking and getting some problem. I just wanted to touch on, before we go into the off-duty stuff, something you mentioned on your commercial break about the cops with the suicides and stuff. We didn't have anything like that back then, and suicides were still high. But they always taught you, no matter what you went through, you got to keep it inside. You always got to project strength, and you couldn't show a weakness. They trained you. It was like a paramilitary outfit, the police, still considered like that today, but they really stuck to it then, where, like I said, we had full contact boxing and judo and stuff like that. But they just taught you overcome. You handle it, you overcome it. You never show weakness to anybody, family, friends, or perpetrator. You overcome everything. So it probably made things bottle up for guys. And suicide rate was always high for police officers. Reasons being, the main reasons being for suicide among police is the underbelly of what they see in their daily routine. You see stuff that, other people do not see because they're home in their bed safe because you're a police officer, but you see things that the normal public will not see. And I'm not even talking about arrests and stuff, but you see other people commit suicide. You see terrible car accidents, people losing arms and legs or being decapitated in situations. And then the other thing is, you have easy access to alcohol and your weapon. A lot of cops, back then it was, accepted things where you drank in bars for free. I was never a drinker. I really didn't hang out in bars. But these are the things that existed. And they just taught you to bottle it up and you just handle it. You never show weakness. Today, this is more of like technology and things that help police. And I hope police officers take advantage of it, because I hate to see an officer lose their life for themselves. It's terrible. It's a drastic move, one you cannot take back. And there are people and officers and departments and units that will help you.
That's a great point. Thanks for bringing that up and expanding upon that. Tom and I have not shied away on this show from having guests and subject matter about officer wellness. How difficult the strain can be on you personally, physically, emotionally, psychologically, on your family. Divorce rates are high. All kinds of crazy stuff happens because you make a dedication and a commitment to serve a community selflessly.
Because they see things that other people do not see.
Right. And
you see the underbelly of the city you live in.
And then you got to go home to be a sensitive, caring parent or husband.
Exactly.
But yeah, it's rough. It's rough. So we really,
that's
really
why
think
the divorce and suicide rate is high among officers.
I hope.
I had a friend early on, and I'll still to this day, and this was back in like probably around 71, early 70s. And a guy I went to high school with, someone I knew, and we both became officers, and he committed suicide. And he, good-looking guy, had a great job, being an officer, making money. I can never understand to this day why he committed suicide, but he did. And no one had a hint of it. And most of the officers who killed themselves, nobody has a hint of it. I had other friends also. I had a guy who was a 2-star chief who I knew before he was a cop too. And he rose through the ranks, very prestigious guy. Your audience might know him, Stephen Silks. And
that's a couple of years ago. I remember that.
Yeah. Well, the years go by pretty fast. It might be like 5 years ago, something like that. I think he was, I think his reason was that they forced him out. And he was in great shape. There's guys that could do the job after 63. And NYPD is one of the jobs where you cannot, you can't hit your 63rd birthday. You have to, retire. And some guys are in great shape. 63 is not old today. I remember when I used to think 30 is old. Now I think 60 is young.
It's all relative, right?
So I just turned 76. I can't believe it.
You don't look it.
I used to think that was like ancient.
Yeah.
And you're in shape like a 40-year-old.
I hope
sure.
So. I try.
So listen,
like a 90-year-old thing.
There's probably a lot of people out here are thinking, with such a prestigious career, medals, accolades, everything that you've gone through, how does it all come to an end? And it comes to an end in a completely different way than everyone would think. Tell us about 1983 in your car accident.
Well, yeah, it ends all of a sudden. It just shows you how dangerous police work is and how fast in a second could change your life. I was on the top of my game. I was physically fit. I was dating a lot of girls. Everything was perfect. I just went on a motorcycle trip to Virginia Beach and back, and I had a new Harley and a chopped it, customized it. I mean, I was on the top of the world. Here I am. I was 34 years old, a second grade detective. I'm going to make first grade soon. I mean, my life was perfect. And I get back from this trip, and I used to do like 95% of the driving, and because I enjoyed driving. And then all of a sudden I come back and I was still vibrating from the motorcycle. And I went to work and I told my partner, you drive today. And he was my best detective partner. He was good. He's still a good friend. We still talk to this day. And I'm retired 42 years. We still talk 2 or 3 times a day. Timmy Kennedy. Right? So I let him drive. And not that it was his fault. We don't know to this day whose fault it was. But 1013 comes over the air, which is an officer in trouble. And he's it was a real 13. We call a real 13 when the officer's calling it, not through 911, because sometimes people make fake calls, right? For any kind of reason. But this was a real call. So we were driving west, and we were going to go to like Jerome Avenue and make a left to go south. Before we could make that left, we were in an unmarked car, and a radio car with a rookie driving and a female officer in it who I knew, and they were coming from the north going south. So before it came into an intersection, before we could make that left, they T-boned right into my right hip. And in those years, I don't know how it is today, but AIS, Accident Investigation Squad, which is part of Highway, need 30 feet of rubber needed back then. I don't know what it is today, to tell how fast the car was going. There was no rubber. And you know how fast the radio car is going with light and siren, probably doing about 70 miles an hour in the street, and just went right into my hip. So I was in very good shape, thank God. And they shattered my hip. They broke my pelvic, left, right, upper and lower, and 23 other bones. And I wind up in the hospital, and I didn't get a stitch, and I didn't get surgery. They x-rayed me every day for the hip, but they had me in traction. And all the muscle acted as a shock absorber. And they just had me lay there for 3 months, and I healed up. And one day I was in the hospital. I thought I was in an even more dangerous situation, because I woke up and there were like 6 girls around the bed who I was dating. There were 6 or 7 girls there, right? And they all got to meet each other, right? And one of them is my wife today, right? So she's there, and she met all the others, and they all faded out because my prognosis was really bad. First, they said I might die. And then they said you're going to be a cripple, and you're going to be tied up for years. And so, but my wife, she stayed in there. She came every day. She had no car. She did a triangle, work, home, and hospital for the 3 months I was there. So I always, still to this day, and Tom knows, I still tease her. I said, I got out of the hospital. I was on drugs in a wheelchair. You moved in, and I still can't get you out. you know. But she hung in there, and we're still together 42 years later.
God bless. That's awesome.
And it's, that's ironic that with all the bad guys I dealt with, I got hurt by my own guys, by an accident. It's ironic, but it just goes to show you, you're always in danger, and any second could change your life or take your life. This is what police officers face, and that's why it's a unique, different job, and the only thing that's like it is the military, active military. And they know who the enemy is. We don't know who the enemy is. You're walking down the street, you could be standing next to the most decent person in the world, or some guy who just killed his wife or robbed a store and killed 2 employees. And you're dealing with him and trying to be a nice guy, but you don't know. And the most routine thing that officers do is pulling over cars for traffic. You don't know who you're dealing with. You think your guy went through a red light, and people drive by you, hundreds of cars are going by, and they think you're just doing a routine, giving a guy a summons. And that guy could be wanted for murder anywhere in the United States, or who knows what he could have done. He knows what he did, but as an officer, you don't know. So when you're doing car stops, that's a very dangerous thing. And officers are in danger all the time.
Yep, that's absolutely true. And I was just reading recently the city of New York and the police department are putting out new directives to not stop cars for lower level infractions.
I saw that. The things they come up with, I mean, even that new law, it's relevantly new, was I think it's called the diaphragm law, where you're not allowed to restrict anybody's breathing or blood flow. So if people who made up this rule had never had a fight in their life. You heard of it? This was after the Garner case. They didn't want anybody using chokeholds. Then they came out with a diaphragm law that you can't restrict breathing or blood flow. So you can't use chokehold. These people never were in a fight, no less ever fought for their life. If I'm fighting for my life and I can get a guy around the neck, I'm getting him around the neck. If that's what it takes to stop him. You need you got to be a martial artist today, or you need 4 cops to stop a violent criminal because you each got to grab an arm and a leg. They really try to hinder everything of police. They took away stop and frisk. They took away nightstick. They took away fighting. They took away everything there is.
You know,
I don't know.
they gave no value to the concept that you, as an experienced cop, know more and can articulate more about what you're seeing than a civilian can. For example, I hate when they call it stop and frisk because it's stop, question, and frisk. Now, if I
Well, that got added later. We did have it was just stop and frisk.
okay, because
Then they added stop, question, and frisk.
they tried to make it we just throw people on the wall. Well, if
So
I
I didn't
jumped
want
out,
an officer using discretion, and that's what things we did in stopping cars and people. That was considered good police work. If you had intuition or a gut feeling, or you had that extra sense that was, and you grabbed the guy who had a gun or committed a robbery, that was great police work. Today, it's considered violating someone's rights. All these lawyers and politicians and liberals, and they got into destroying the greatest job in the world. And who suffers? The public, the people that you're supposed to protect.
Yeah, we've said that
It's
for
a
years.
sad situation.
Yeah, we've said it on this show. We've said it on other shows, and you're exactly right. You know, when the police have things taken away from them, the public suffers, not us.
Exactly.
We're still trying to do our job, and you're restricting police officers from doing their job, and it hurts no one but the citizens of that precinct or the city.
It's a sad state of affairs, but you know what? The pendulum always swings back the other way. And one day it'll go the other way. It's done that in the past numerous times, and the pendulum will swing back.
it will.
Because it has to. Otherwise, we're going to go into a jungle situation.
You're absolutely right. And being a child of the city, it always pains me to look and see when they forget the basics, when they forget that letting cops do their job can bring the city back and create a vibrant environment for people to raise families and everything. And they don't care. Politicians live for the moment, live for the election, live to appease whoever they want.
Well, that's one of the things that went wrong with the police department also, by letting politicians dictate how a job should be done when they have no experience, no training, and they know no knowledge. I believe the job should be ran by officers that work up through the ranks because they got the experience, they got the knowledge and the training. Our commanders should all be come up through the ranks: cop, sergeant, lieutenant, captain, and so on. And that's who should be running a police department. Obviously under the mayor, but you also have to elect a mayor that has the people's interests in mind.
I can't wait to sit down with you and break bread and talk more in person because you're just a fascinating guy, and so much of the stuff you.
I don't think so. I just tell it like it is.
No, you know what? It's semi unique nowadays, but you have such great perspective, having been doing what you did when you did it in a place like New York City, and now seeing all these changes. So.
But I was trained by the best. When I seen these cops, there were cops in the 4-1 that I just inspired to be. And there were guys I like kids idolize, like a baseball player or something, a ball player. I idolized these cops. I saw these guys coming in with these collars. There was this guy, Stanley Gamp, a uniformed officer, and he had a rack going over his shoulder, all these medals and stuff. I said, man, I want to be. Every day he came in with felony weight narcotics. And in the 4-1, the only narcotics that was there was heroin. I didn't see anything else. And I'll say it was methadone, but that was liquid heroin supplied by the city. But I didn't see anything till I got made detective and went north. We only saw heroin, right? It was too expensive for coke, and they didn't bother with grass then, And this guy every day came in with these collars, and then one day I got to be his partner. He went to anti-crime, and then I got into anti-crime, and me and him were partners. May rest in peace. He passed away years ago, but it was like like you want to play baseball, and then you get to play on a team with Mickey Mantle or something. I'm inspired to be like these guys, and I got to work with them. But these guys in the 4-1, when I say 4-1, I want you to know I'm encompassing all ghetto precinct because these guys are so knowledgeable, and you learn from them. And these guys, they just teach you the way to the street, and I just ate it up like a kid in a candy store. I just wanted to do it, and I looked up to them, and I tried to learn from them, and they wanted to teach us. It wasn't like some precincts, like I can imagine, a veteran didn't want to bother with a rookie. But in the 4-1, the guys wanted to teach you, the camaraderie was so tight. And they all say that. And when we go to our reunions, the turnouts and stuff, and you see these guys from 60 years ago, it's amazing. It's amazing. And I miss. That's what I miss. The 42 years, I miss that camaraderie. I miss the action and the camaraderie. But that's how you learn from being on the street. And I learned from the best.
And you know what? We're never ending family. And we're always going to have each other's back. We're always going to have the memories. We're always going to have each other to fall back on and tell these great stories. And you know what, Dan, having Ralph Friedman on for an hour just doesn't seem to be justice. But what we'll do, you're going to come to New York. We're going to go see Ralph. We're going to do some sort of show from that room he's sitting in.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we're going to get that pleasure.
Thank you.
Yeah, we'll
Thank you for
get
having me.
Oh man, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
I just want to plug my book and show.
Oh yeah.
They're both it's Street Justice, the Bronx, and I got one season, 6 episodes, and right now they moved me to Amazon, so it's on Amazon Prime, and the book is available in audio, Kindle, and paperback on Amazon.com also. And just to let the audience know, I'm starting to work on a next book.
Yeah.
And the next book is going to be called Off the Clock. It's going to be incidents and arrests that occurred off duty.
Oh man.
And incidents also that didn't result in an arrest, but just stories of off the clock stuff.
Oh, that's great. I can't wait to see it. Can't wait to see it.
Me too.
I'll probably rewatch your episodes because they're so awesome and they're so cool, and it's just
It's very gritty. It's a down to earth, and it was low budget, but we did the best we can, and people seem to like it. And then we got stymied by the George Floyd thing was one of the things that held us up in writing a second book. They didn't want to do things on cops. It's unbelievable.
Now's your time. Now's your time for sure.
Well, I'm gonna try again. I never give up.
no.
I'm a very persistent person.
No kidding, really.
You think? You think? Yeah.
And anyone out there, listen, go to BronxStreetWarrior.com and you can see the room that is in Ralph's house and read more about him and a whole host of things about his career and what he's doing now, which is fascinating. But we're going to have somewhat of a part 2 to this for sure at a later date. But Ralph, when 2 detectives from the NYPD get to sit down on a show that we have with a legend like you, it is an absolute honor because it doesn't happen a lot.
Well, thank you for having me. Thanks, Tom. Thanks, Dan. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And you leave a heck of a legacy. We're going to record from that room. I can't wait to do it. And that's going to be a lot of fun. But
okay, great.
Yeah, our audience hasn't heard the last of Ralph Friedman, that's for sure.
Nope. So
I was very proud. I was very proud to serve, to leave my mark on the NYPD is a big thing to me personally. It's it's the best police department in the world recognizable, and to be part of it and to leave a mark. I'm happy that people still talk about my career 42 years after I left. But it's a big thing. I'm just a proud guy of it.
Good. You should be.
I still walk around with police shirts and police hats, and I'm proud to tell people I was part of the NYPD.
Amen. So this is our part of the show that we just remember and say a prayer for our law enforcement officers out there in the NYPD and all around this country because they do a unthinkable job in bad situations and unthinkable situations that are dangerous every single day. So please keep them in your prayers. Keep our military vets in your prayers, them and their families, because their families go through it just as much as they do. Please remember them and keep them in your prayers. And as always, subscribe, follow, all that good stuff on youtube.com/@goldshields. TheGoldShieldShow.com is our website, and every audio platform you can think of. Please follow us, subscribe, bell, name it. Keep following us because you get to see great episodes like this with amazing, legendary guests like Ralph Friedman. So for my partner, Dan Murphy, and a legend, living legend, Ralph Friedman, retired NYPD, most decorated detective, this is Tom Smith for Gold Shields. Everyone out there, please stay safe. Stay tuned for Overtime. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Back with Overtime. Back with Overtime. What do you think, Tom?
Listen, very rarely do you sit with a living legend. And when it comes to the NYPD, there's not a lot of us, but the ones that are here, he's a living legend. And to have the opportunity to do what we just did doesn't happen often, man, in our careers. It doesn't.
It doesn't. And he comes from an era that nudged up against our era, but it was different enough where it's fascinating. And to the audience who doesn't understand how simple police work used to be and how complicated the world has made it. But he's a guy, these guys were just like when we started, you were much more, I'm a problem solver. I got to solve problems. And he was out at a time when New York City and his specific area was absolutely out of control.
You can't even, you can't even compare it or visualize what it was like. I mean, you lived in Queens. I grew up in Inwood. My dad worked in the 4-1 and in the 4-4 throughout the Bronx. So I would take trips with him. And you did, you lived in the city. You took your life in your own hands, crossing a bridge or the river to go into the Bronx in the 70s. That was a war zone, nothing less than a war zone.
So he worked in a 401 precinct, Fort Apache, the Bronx. The movie was made about it. It's fictitious, of course, but there's a lot of elements of truth in it. That he worked in a precinct is about a mile square in size. That's it. It's a thumbnail. It's nothing. But it probably had 175,000 residents or maybe more, teeming with life, teeming with crime, 100+ homicides every year, 100+ in a square mile.
Every year?
Every year for many years. So you're going out there with your 6-shot revolver.
No vests.
No vests he had when he came on. Nope.
Maybe a radio. Maybe.
Your guts, like he said, your wits, your guts, your experience, and your commitment to getting the job done. And he's a guy. Wow, the stuff he went through, the stuff he's seen. He packed, as he said, 35 years of police work into 15 years.
And like I said, if you go on to everyone who's listening to Overtime, go on his website, BronxStreetWarrior.com. It has pictures of his medals, of his room, and just see what this man did. It is, you can't make a character in a movie like him because it wouldn't be believable. And he was real.
Awesome man. And we can't thank him enough for joining the show. Really a pleasure to talk to somebody who's got that much experience. And, you talk about numbers, 2,000 arrests. This guy wasn't bringing in people for jaywalking. He was bringing in people with guns, doing robberies, murders, shootings, rapes, burglaries, big-time stuff happening with dangerous people in a time when the criminal justice system in New York City was absolutely broken. The city was broke. They were laying off. It was a crazy time.
Yep. And I think the average, I tried to look it up last night, but for some reason it just wasn't coming up. I think the average 20-year career of a cop is 250 to 350 arrests maybe in your career. So that's about the average. He had 2,000 in 14 years. 15 shootings, 200 off-duty arrests.
And when you say 2,000 arrests, that's the ones he put his name on. That was his arrest. He was present at and assisted in probably 5 times that, if not.
He said, I think, if I remember correctly, 30,000.
I believe it.
Other arrests that he was involved in.
I believe it.
That's a movie character, man. That's Jack Bauer before Jack Bauer was Jack Bauer.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many fictitious stories that are out there and people go to movie theaters and buy. Ralph Friedman's story is Jack Reacher and the rest of them
all
steroids. Yeah.
And like I said, Dan, it's a pleasure, and we're gonna do another part with this and go to his house and figure a way to film it, a show out there, because sitting down with him is even more impressive. Wait till you meet the man that he's in front of you. But that's what me and you as young cops. That's who, other than
Oh God,
your uncle, my dad, who we looked up to. That's who you wanted to be like.
I wanted to be like him.
Yeah.
Just one of those guys in the precinct that was like, how does he find that stuff? How does he bring in those great collars? How does he handle himself so well in crazy situations? How does he have an aura about him where people part when he gets out of the car? That's earned and learned.
And he had a rack of medals that hit his ear.
Anybody understands how the NYPD does a metal thing, you understand. When you're around long enough, it starts hitting up your ear.
Right.
And these guys, those are the guys, the rookies went, wow.
Right.
Like being a rookie, being a bat boy in the dugout with DiMaggio.
Yeah.
It's like
You would look on his rack and be like, what's that? Medals you've never seen, because 10 guys have them. It's.
But you know what I like about him? What I like about him also is he stressed and he understood that there was good people in that precinct who wanted to have a normal life with their families and who couldn't because of the environment. So they were there and we were there for them.
He said it right in the beginning. Yeah. And he means that, he's a Bronx kid. That's why, his neighborhood probably wasn't the best either during that time.
And I can guarantee you there's a lot of people who had a chance at a life and grew up and got out of there and made something of themselves because of the work he and his partners did to protect them at various times. Guarantee he changed lives. Saved them, guaranteed.
How many lives he saved down the line. That's immeasurable. That. But just, another one, Dan, that, we have this silly little thing going and we get someone like Ralph Friedman on, which is something we'll remember for sure.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, this has been great. Again, fantastic show. We love the overtime. This is a chance for us to talk about and reflect upon the guest. And we thank you. We cannot do this without our audience and our sponsors, and we are so blessed. Give us, reach out to us via the website, right, Tom? Send us a note. Do you like what we're doing? Do you have any ideas, different directions you'd like us to go in? We're audience driven. We want to hear it. We're just a couple of knucklehead retired cops trying to figure this out.
Absolutely. TheGoldShieldShow.com. Hit the connect and shoot us an email. We'd love to read them, look at them, and come up with other ideas for the show and guest suggestions as well. Dan, another fantastic job, brother.
Thank you. You too. This was a great one. Yeah. Well, thanks to Ralph.
Absolutely. As always, I guess. Everyone out there, stay safe. We'll see everybody soon. We'll be back again with another fantastic show. Be good, everyone. Stay safe.